If you're trying to win your fantasy league, this video is for you because today we are breaking down the 7 wide receivers that you should be trading for to improve your team and ultimately win your league. And let's start with Rome Odunze because man, oh man, it was a frustrating day and I have Rome Odunze in multiple leagues that I really care about. I lost by 7 points in one league where I had Rome Odunze, and you want to know why that's annoying? Because in a game, let's scroll up right here, in a game that was 47-42, the Bears won this game. There was nearly 90 total points scored. Rome Odunze, okay, let's see how many yards did he have? How many yards? Let's see. Oh, Colson Loveland had 118. Okay, breakout game. DJ Moore's a good receiver, 72. Olamide Zaccheaus, 58. Wait, the heck, 22 for the quarterback? The quarterback, Caleb Williams, the Bears quarterback, had 22 receiving yards on 2 catches in this game. And Rome Odunze is all the way down here at 0 catches for 0 yards on 3 targets. He had 2 drops in this game. What a frustrating day it was, and it just creates the perfect buy low window for Rome Odunze, who has been somewhat struggling the last few weeks. Because if you look at this, the last couple of games for Rome Odunze, 0 points this past week. Then he had his nice game of 114 yards, had a bounce back game of 18 fantasy points. But before that, 5 points, was on a bye week during that span as well. So if you're talking about the last 5 weeks in terms of how relevant he's been in your fantasy lineups, he's only top 5 fantasy points in the last 5 weeks, 1 time. That's very frustrating for a fantasy manager who has Rome Odunze. But there is some context that needs to be added there. One game he had a touchdown called back when it shouldn't have been. Another game he had a deep ball overthrown where he could have had a big play. In his first 4 games of the year, he averaged 19.9 fantasy points per game. In his next 4 games of the year, just 7 fantasy points per game. Now, maybe the real Rome Odunze isn't 20 points per game as an elite top 5 receiver in fantasy, and it's probably not 7 points per game as basically somebody who's on your bench or on a waiver wire. It's probably somewhere in between at like 14 or 15 fantasy points per game, which makes him a very usable player. But right now, people, because the last 4 weeks he has only averaged 7 points per game, who have him on their teams, you could probably buy low on this guy, who I still consider one of the best fantasy wide receivers, especially if the Bears are going to continue to put up points like they just did this past week. And let's be clear here, he's still the number 1 wide receiver on this team. Like DJ Moore had 72 receiving yards this past week. A lot of it came on 1 big receiving play. Okay, that's fine. That's just 1 play. Rome Odunze's had many of those this year. Luther Burton was out this past week. He's clearly not going to be a big piece of this offense, at least this year compared to Rome Odunze. And Olamide Zaccheaus had a nice game this past week, only a slot wide receiver. So still the clear number 1 option on this team. When you look at what went wrong for Rome Odunze this past week, I mean, dropping 2 passes is going to be one thing. Like the offense and the play caller and the quarterback might not go to you in key situations if you just showed you're going to drop the ball twice. But it was also just 1 game, a game in which the tight end broke out for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns, a game in which was super wacky. Like DJ Moore, not only did he have 72 yards, he had a rushing touchdown, and DJ Moore had a 17-yard touchdown throwing in this game. That's why Caleb Williams had 2 receptions for 22 yards. Like, it was a super weird game. Not to mention, by the way, let's pull it up right here, or actually that 17 yards was his rushing touchdown. His passing touchdown was just 2 yards, DJ Moore. Either way, this was also a game where Kyle Monangai, a rookie, had 176 rushing yards, so he took up a lot of production on the ground. Just a weird game. I don't think Rome Odunze moving forward, he might not have another game this entire season or for the next 2 seasons where he has 0 points, no catches, right? Which is exactly why he's a nice buy low. Look at some of these trades that have happened literally today. As I'm recording this on Wednesday, this video will come out on Thursday. RJ Harvey today for Rome Odunze, give me a Odunze. Rashid Shaheed, I like that he's in Seattle now. I think it gives him a lot more upside rest of season, reuniting with Kubiak, his offensive coordinator from the Saints last year. Still, give me Rome Odunze. Justin Herbert, he's a number 2 quarterback in total fantasy points. Depends on your needs. I still prefer Odunze. I prefer Odunze over Kamara, over Quinshon Judkins, and that one's a little bit closer, over DJ Moore, over Metcalf, over all these guys for the most part. Go get Rome Odunze. You could clearly buy him so cheap right now, and it's great. I'm actually going to go send the trade right now for him in the Flock League. Next up, let's stick at the wide receiver position. A veteran here, the former first-round pick from 2023 for the Baltimore Ravens, and that is Zay Flowers, because he just had, I would say, like a quieter game in terms of like breakout wide receiver standpoints or like being a top 10 performer on the week, but it was a very good, encouraging game since Lamar Jackson finally came back. And when you take into account his game script, like he had 5 catches, 64 yards, led the team in receiving, in targets, in receptions, all that. And when you factor in that it was a 28-6 game, right? This game was pretty much over in the 3rd quarter when the Ravens put up 2 more touchdowns, and then in the entire second half, the Dolphins did not score again, and they basically just leaned on the running game. Lamar Jackson in his return only had 23 pass attempts in this game compared to the team running the ball 31 times. So Zay Flowers came out, he saw like a 25% target share. He had his most receiving yards in basically a month, 64 receiving yards, and he's now averaging over 70 receiving yards per game when Lamar Jackson is healthy this year and active. In fact, the first 4 games of the year before Lamar Jackson got injured and was done, Flowers was averaging 15 fantasy points per game on 76 receiving yards per game, 7 targets per game. Everything looked really good. Since then, though, it's dropped off a little bit. Obviously, the receiving yards per game have dropped. The overall scoring from the offense has dropped. Like, without Lamar, they were only averaging like 10 points a week. Lamar comes back, they immediately put up 28 points. Yeah, he's an MVP. He's one of the best players in football. That makes sense. But since Flowers didn't have this massive game, he had just 5 catches, 64 yards, just 11 points in his game log, you could still probably buy him at a fair price. I mean, when you look at his competition right now for targets, it seems like Rashad Bateman's breakout last year is not continuing this year. He's coming off of having a 19% target share last week. Hopkins is basically out there for a few plays, only a 5% target share. Flowers is the clear leading receiver. When they get in the red zone, Mark Andrews would be involved a little bit more, but it's Zay Flowers in terms of target share. And when you look at his upcoming schedule against matchups against the Jets, who don't have Sauce Gardner anymore, the Bengals twice is just amazing for him. A Steelers secondary that is beatable. These are some amazing matchups for Zay Flowers. If he doesn't break out this week against the Vikings, moving forward, like his next 4 to 5 matchups, awesome heading into the fantasy postseason. Some trades you can make right now for Zay Flowers, people are sending. These are real trades over the past 24 hours. These are being logged on fantasycalc.com database. No affiliation, just a good tool. Jake Ferguson, Zach Charbonnet, Quentin Johnston. I mean, these are all Kamani Vidal, Woody Marks. These are all deals that are happening 1-for-1 right now for Zay Flowers. I want Zay Flowers, and I'm sure all of you do, easily in all these situations. Try and send an offer while you still can. Before we get into the next player, 2 seconds of your time to hit the subscribe button. If you enjoy my content, you find it helpful, entertaining, maybe a little bit of both, I really appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button. It really goes a long way. Now, when it comes to DJ Moore, I want to talk about another Bears receiver because I don't want to be trading for DJ Moore. I actually want to talk up and bring up DJ Moore right now as a sell candidate. I just showed you earlier that he's coming off of a game where he had 72 receiving yards, 4 catches, 72 yards, 11 fantasy points. That's fine, but you look at his overall box score and he ends up putting up 22 plus points. His best performance of the year because he had a rushing touchdown on 1 carry and a passing touchdown on 1 pass attempt. Those things happening again, let alone in the same week, unlikely the rest of the season. So if you have people in your league that are thinking like, oh, DJ Moore is back. Rome Odunze had 0 points last week. DJ Moore had 22 points, multiple touchdowns. That's exactly the person you should be trading to DJ Moore for because they value him somewhat highly. Where the truth is, when you look at the first 7 weeks of the season, the first 7 games of the season for the Bears, it's still Rome Odunze with a clear-cut 26% target share. DJ Moore is actually tied with Olamide Zaccheaus, who's not picked up in any leagues outside of like 14-team leagues, maybe deep 12-team leagues. Olamide Zaccheaus has earned the same amount of targets this year as DJ Moore in this offense. That's not great. This was a guy who was averaging just 5 targets per game, 7.7 fantasy points per game the first 7 weeks of the season, the first 7 games. This 22-point game is clearly an outlier when he's throwing and running for a touchdown as a wide receiver. But if you are in a position where you can try and sell high on him, especially since there's guys like George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb going on their bye weeks this week and Chris Olave going on his bye week next week, this would be the week. Like, just be like, yeah, I mean, the guy never misses a game. He's played every single game in 3 straight years, had 135 targets in back-to-back years, and now he's heating up. This is how you could pitch it to the person that you're going up against. You don't want to lie, but you just want to give them some context on the type of player DJ Moore is. Where in reality, you know that Rome Odunze is, like we just mentioned, a buy low candidate, and the rest of the season probably going to be the guy who leads this team in target share ahead of DJ Moore. And when Luther Burton comes back, maybe this week from a concussion, that's going to hurt DJ Moore's upside in terms of the pecking order and the target share. So it is the perfect week off of probably what could be the best performance of the year. Multi-touchdown game, 70 receiving yards, almost 100 total yards from DJ Moore. This could be the week to trade him. 1-for-1 deals for his teammate Rome Odunze, for Garrett Wilson coming back from injury, for Trevion Henderson, who's been getting more usage to Ramondre Stevenson hurt. I'd be trading DJ Moore easily for all these. Even Kenneth Walker, who's been a hot or cold guy, annoying guy to have this year, I'd rather have Walker rest of season than DJ Moore. Now, before we get into the next player, I've got something for the people watching who actually watch football, because I've teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6 to give you more ways to win while watching the games. Here's what I mean. All you do is pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, whether it's passing yards, touchdowns, stuff like that. And if your picks hit, well, you win. It's simple. There's no complicated rules. It's basically just you calling how a player performs and getting rewarded when you're right. Now, here's the part that you need to know. New DraftKings customers play $5 or more and get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly. So if you're new to DraftKings Pick 6, you literally just play $5 or more and they'll drop $50 in Pick 6 credits into your account. All you have to do now is download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now to get in on the action, and make sure you sign up using promo code SAL to take advantage of this offer. In partnership with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. Let's go back to the veteran wide receivers that we can buy low on, and we want to talk about Courtland Sutton, who, when you look at what happened this past week, just 1 catch. It's a pretty ugly box score when you look at 1 catch, but it went for a 30-yard touchdown. So the fact that it went for a 30-yard touchdown means that Courtland Sutton in his game logs will have 10 fantasy points, but it's still not anything great, especially when you look at the game logs recently for Courtland Sutton. They're not what they used to be. Because if we pull up the player profiler game logs, let's look at his last 4 games. 10 points is like barely flex worthy for the most part. 16 points is good, and then just 3 points. So 3 out of his last 4 weeks, he's barely or not even topping 10 10 fantasy points for you. And for a player that was likely taken in the 5th round of most of your drafts, maybe even the 4th round in a competitive 12-team format, that's not getting it done. But you know the underlying stuff here is that Courtland Sutton is not the problem. For the most part, Bo Nix has really struggled, especially the last 2 to 2.5 games. For stretches of those games, he's had some really bad play. But on the season right now, this is still a team that, despite the fact that Sean Payton's there and they have multiple running backs, they're still passing the ball a ton. 4th in the NFL in pass attempts per game, 36 attempts per game. Number 1 in deep attempts. In terms of red zone passing, they're top 10 there as well. So the opportunity is there for Courtland Sutton, who, despite Troy Franklin trending up, Marvin Mims has had his moments, though he's dealing with an injury right now. Sutton is still the clear-cut, in my opinion, number 1 receiver on this team. Let's not forget, to end last year, the final 8 games of the season, he was a top 12 fantasy wide receiver, 17 points per game on 8.4 targets per game. And if we look this year, although there's been some stretches lately of some poor play, to start this season, 18 points, 23, 19, 18, 17, right? Sure, these last couple of weeks, he's only had about 10 fantasy points or so. That's keeping his price point in check, and it's the perfect time before your trade deadlines in fantasy these next 1 to 3 weeks or so to try and send an offer for a proven veteran who can compete for you down the stretch. Because let's not forget, his main target competition is basically Troy Franklin, who has been playing well and getting a lot of targets from his former college teammate Bo Nix, the time they spent together at Oregon. But it's still, I mean, outside of that, Evan Ingram at the tight end position isn't doing much. RJ Harvey out of the backfield is doing some things, but nothing too spectacular in terms of earning like Christian McCaffrey type volume. Right now, Courtland Sutton, sell high on Colston Loveland indeed to get Sutton. Devonta Smith's like a fair 1-for-1. Sell Alvin Kamara, sell Sam Laporta, sell Brandon Aubrey, sell high on Dalton Kincaid. I would even sell high on Chase Brown. I want Courtland Sutton over all of those guys I just mentioned. And I also want this next wide receiver because his role in his offense should only get better, and that's Romeo Doubs. I was going to say Rome Odunze. Romeo Doubs for the Packers, because you probably know by now, Tucker Kraft is done for the year with a torn ACL, unfortunately. And as of right now, Matthew Golden is day-to-day with a shoulder injury, isn't considered long-term, but we don't know if he's going to play this upcoming week. So Romeo Doubs, who, by the way, has been amazing. We'll talk about it for the Packers the past month of the season. Their clear number 1 option. It's always, oh, the Packers, they rotate their receivers. That's true, but Romeo Doubs has been the alpha lately. And that only continued this past week in a loss against the Panthers, despite a tough matchup against the Panthers. J.C. Horn, cornerback, 7 catches, 91 yards for Romeo Doubs in this game. A team-high 10 targets. Nobody else had more than 5 targets, which now, since week 4, these last 5 games for Romeo Doubs, 15.8 fantasy points per game, borderline top 12 fantasy wide receiver, by the way, a clear starter in fantasy on 8.2 targets and 64 receiving yards per game. All of those numbers, 8.2 targets, 64 yards per game, 16 fantasy points per game, are all top 20 amongst wide receivers, meaning Romeo Doubs is not only just a flex play right now, he is a wide receiver 2 or 3 in your lineup every single week. And now his competition with guys like Jaden Reed not back yet, Tucker Kraft hurt, Matthew Golden hurt, it's only getting weaker. He should see more targets. Check this out right here. According to Joe Orrico over on Twitter, he says last week's expected points, according to RotoViz, number 4 amongst all wide receivers, Romeo Doubs, in terms of based off of his usage, how many fantasy points he was supposed to score. And by the way, the Packers schedule upcoming, Eagles is a fine matchup in terms of secondary play, then good matchups against the Giants, the Bears. You have some solid matchups coming up for Romeo Doubs in this Packers offense. And if you wanted to look forward into the fantasy postseason, look at this: semifinals and championship week, the Bears and the Ravens secondaries. Those are some great spots for Romeo Doubs, who right now I don't think people view him as like a top 20 fantasy producer, but that's how he's been producing the last 5 weeks of the year. Some deals that you can get done right now, 1-for-1 for Romeo Doubs: Rashid Shaheed, Dalton Schultz off a big game, Mark Andrews off a big game where he basically relied on touchdowns, Jordan Mason, who might start this week if Aaron Jones' shoulder isn't healthy. I'll take Romeo Doubs rest of season over all of those players. Now, when it comes to Jameson Williams, he finally had a good game this past week, but I actually, similar to DJ Moore, I think it's the perfect time to be selling Jameson Williams. This past week for the Lions, 4 catches, which ranked 3rd on the team, 66 yards, 3rd on the team in terms of wide receivers and tight ends. He had the touchdown. It was a touchdown down the left sideline. You might have seen it. It was a poorly played ball by the cornerback. It was probably a push-off from Jameson Williams. Instead of going out of bounds, he was able to score the touchdown. So it took that crazy of a play where maybe there should have been a penalty for finally Jameson Williams to do something. But let's be honest here. Let's look at this guy's game logs. You probably spent a 5th round pick on Jameson Williams this year. Week 1, he scores 6 points. Okay, fine. You go back to him in week 2, he scores 18 points. So you keep him in your lineups, right? You keep him in your fantasy lineups, and then he scores 6, 5, and 2. So at this point, after he hasn't scored over 6 fantasy points in a month for you, you probably said, Jameson Williams, you're going to my bench. Just in time for him to put up 18 fantasy points. So you probably told yourself, okay, you're back in my lineup, and then he gets you 0 fantasy points. So since he got you 0 fantasy points, you put him back on your bench, I would guess, this past week, and that's when he gets you 16 fantasy points. So realistically, most people who have Jameson Williams have only benefited in week 2 where he scored 18 fantasy points. Since then, he's literally been in your lineup, not even getting you 6 fantasy points, and then you probably probably had to sit him because of his lack of production, and that's when he's gone off. He's been so unreliable and likely never in your starting lineup. He's a pointless player to have on your team. So try and sell high on this dude who right now is only averaging 4.5 targets per game, 53rd amongst wide receivers, and you spent the 5th round pick on that guy. You're not getting your justice, right? 15% target share, 62nd overall amongst wide receivers. This is disgusting. This is a clear 4th option in a passing attack behind Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Oh, by the way, all those guys, the tight end, the wide receiver, the running back, are elite at their positions at what they do. Jameson Williams is a clear 4th option in this passing attack. Doesn't look like it's going to get any better. I mean, we're already into week 10 of the season, by the way. Like, there's only 4 or 5 more weeks until the fantasy playoffs. Try and sell high while you can. Somebody just recently did 1-for-1 for Derrick Henry. Give me Derrick Henry. Amarion Hampton, I'm not really going to trade Jameson Williams for him, although I think they're pretty comparable, I would say, at this point. If you know you're a fantasy playoff team, I'd probably try and get Amarion Hampton and just hope that he returns by like week 15 this year. I think he's going to give you better play in the fantasy playoffs than what Jameson Williams potentially could do for you. You're just never going to trust Jameson Williams to be in your starting lineup, especially if you're in the fantasy playoffs. You're either going to get 16 fantasy points or potentially 0. Are you really going to trust that guy? Try and trade him if you can. Now, we've talked about the wide receivers you should trade for in this video, but if you want to see my #1 trade target for completely free at every single position for this week, you can check it out with the link in the description below or by heading to topfantasytrades.com. That is topfantasytrades.com. That will take you to this page where you just enter your email right here. Once you enter your email, I'll show you an example. It'll then take you to this page where it just kind of gives you some more information on what to expect from next steps. It basically just tells you like, yeah, it's going to be in your email. So be sure to just check that. Also check your spam and promotional folders if you don't see it within a minute or two. That's with the link in the description below, completely free, or by heading to topfantasytrades.com. Next up, I want to talk about George Kittle. Now, I know he's not a wide receiver, but I wanted to sneak in the tight end, the veteran tight end, into this video because this is a guy who, since he's returned from injury, has not been good for you. He's only averaged 5.7 fantasy points per game. He even got 0 points in 1 out of those 3 games so far, so it hasn't been great. But let's keep in mind, this is an older tight end coming off of a serious hamstring injury that put him on IR, kept him out a month. Let's not forget that just a year ago, he had 1,100 receiving yards, 94 targets. Like, let's get him up to speed. He's only played in 4 games. He scored a touchdown in 2 out of those 4 games, right? So let's give him a little bit of time to get back going. Now that he's about a month removed from returning from his injury, this should be the week that he can potentially start to ramp back up, and the perfect week for you to buy George Kittle. Now, a big missing piece for him has been Brock Purdy, but as we've recently got from Kyle Shanahan, he's basically said this is Brock's team once he returns. Now, unfortunately, Brock Purdy is dealing with a turf toe injury that apparently even when he does return, he'll still be limited by. So hopefully Brock Purdy can return soon because Kittle averages nearly 70 receiving yards per game with Brock Purdy. And we know now Deebo Samuel isn't on this team. Brandon Ayuk still seems like nowhere close to returning, maybe another 3 to 4 weeks at least. So once Purdy is back, that's where wheels can really be up for Kittle. And check out this upcoming schedule. You have nice matchups upcoming against the Cardinals. Decent matchup when it comes to the tight end position against the Panthers, the Colts, the Titans. If you go overall into the fantasy postseason schedule where Brock Purdy should be back by then, it's an awesome matchup. You're going to get matchups against the Titans defense, the Colts, and the Bears. That's exactly why I think you should be trading for George Kittle. Maybe these next few weeks without Brock Purdy, if he doesn't return, aren't going to be great, but Kittle should be even healthier by the fantasy postseason with Brock Purdy, and that's where in great matchups he can pay off. Some trades that have happened over the last 24 hours, Jake Ferguson 1-for-1, Juwan Jennings, Jaylen Warren, Wan'Dale Robinson. I probably do all these deals. The only one that's a little bit closer is Jaylen Warren if you don't have a lot of running back depth. I mean, we can keep scrolling here. DeAndre Swift, Dallas Goedert, Wan'Dale Robinson. I do all these deals right now to get George Kittle for the most part, depending on your team needs, on your squad, the league settings, all that stuff. Next up, let's talk about Chris Olave, who's only looking like a better buy low, or not even a buy low candidate, but just somebody you should trade for by the day right now because his biggest competition for targets, who's actually out-targeted him the last 2 weeks, in Rashid Shaheed, was traded from the Saints to the Seahawks to reunite with his former coach, Clint Kubiak of the Saints, who was the offensive coordinator last year, which now this leads Chris Olave to be the clear-cut #1 option. He has been all year long, but now really no competition for targets. And this is a guy in Chris Olave who's coming off of his worst game of the year. 3 catches for 57 yards in his first game with the rookie quarterback Tyler Shuck, who, by the way, looked terrible out there. In this game, he only had 24 pass attempts. An offense that wants to run a lot of plays, the Saints, they had one of the lowest time of possessions of the entire year and over the last 5 years this past week. So that's probably not going to continue to go on. But moving forward, this quarterback situation could be shaky, so Olave is going to need as many targets as he can get. So with Shaheed gone, that should be a better opportunity. Olave, even after this down game this last week, still averaging 9.7 targets per game, #2 in the league, top 10 in target share. Everything looks good for Chris Olave. We'll see what happens with this new quarterback change, but top 5 in receptions, 560 yards per game. All this is pretty good. We started to see him get used down more as well in those final couple of starts with Spencer Rattler. Hopefully that continues, especially with Rashid Shaheed, their primary downfield receiver, now gone. And really, look at what is left over right now with Shaheed gone. I mean, this was already a gross offense. It's gotten even worse. You have a dusty Alvin Kamara at running back, Brandon Cooks, who's pretty washed, Devon Vele, who they gave up 2 picks to get, and he hasn't even been involved in this offense, Mason Tipton, who couldn't do anything when given opportunities last year, and then basically just Juwan Johnson. So So in my opinion, it's like Jawan Johnson now in the middle of the field, and maybe they try and get Devon Vele, a bigger wide receiver who doesn't have that much speed, more involved. It seems like it's wheels up for Chris Olave. Sure, the defense might put more attention his way, but I trust Kellen Moore to scheme Chris Olave open in the short to intermediate parts of the field, especially over the middle of the field. So off of his down game, try and get Chris Olave. RJ Harvey is the perfect sell high candidate. That trade just happened today. RJ Harvey for Chris Olave. I would love Olave there. If we look at some other deals on here, Mike Evans, who knows if he even plays again this year? Yeah, go get Chris Olave. Tenero McMillan is a fair 1-for-1 deal. I'll take Chris Olave there, who I think rest of season is going to rank top 5 in targets. So these are the wide receivers you should trade for right now while you still can. Now, if you want to see the running back version of this video, you can check it out right here. We released this one recently. The 5 running backs and a couple of sell players in there, so 7 total players at the running back position you should try and trade for and trade away before week 10 begins.